Good evening. I'm really proud to be here this evening in front of you as president of this great organization, AJC, and am delighted to introduce our speaker this evening, White House Chief of Staff, Denis McDonough. But first, Mr. McDonough, let me say a word or two about AJC and the Global Forum. We have attendance here this evening of over 1,800 people from across the United States and over 70 countries. Over the course of our program, we will have heard from 4 foreign ministers, 1 Israeli senior cabinet minister, the prime ministers of Ukraine and Israel via video, and will have dined privately with nearly 40 ambassadors. Throughout the 108 years of history of the AJC, we have worked very, very closely with the US administration, whichever administration was in power. And as the public continues to debate America's proper role on the world stage, AJC will remain steadfast in our commitment to advocate substantive engagement of the United States in the global challenges of the day. Last year, on this very stage, Secretary of State John Kerry launched the American effort to achieve Israeli-Palestinian peace, right here. 9 months later, while negotiations have reached a standstill, AJC is grateful to this administration for the efforts. And Mr. McDonough, please pass that message on to President Obama and to Secretary of State Kerry. We recognize, with the expiration of the 9 months negotiating period, the administration may wish to pause for reflection. It is indeed our earnest hope that this vital task will remain a high priority for the United States. AJC also values the administration's effort to pursue a diplomatic deal with Iran, effectively preventing Iranian nuclear capacity with a negotiated settlement. While AJC does not underestimate the challenges that this presents, America's efforts to achieve a comprehensive agreement are commendable. Today, the United States faces many global challenges as well that are high on the AJC's agenda. In Ukraine, Russia continues to challenge the Ukrainian people's rights to determine their own destiny, contesting age-old norms of sovereignty and territorial integrity. Tragically, in Syria, more than 150,000 people have been killed in a conflict that we just do not see an end to as we hear tonight. So the administration has a lot on its plate, and AJC is ready to provide support in any meaningful way we can. My friends, we are indeed fortunate that our next guest speaker, previously Deputy National Security Advisor and now as White House Chief of Staff, who has a wide-ranging and deep understanding of the world, and as we would wish the world to become, is here to join us this evening. According to the New York Times, Mr. McDonough is the first aide President Obama sees in the morning and the last he sees at night. That's the New York Times. The Chief of Staff just mentioned to me before he came here that he just had his nightly walk with President Obama, and he advised the President what he was going to address us, the content of his address, and the President wholeheartedly endorsed that. There's no one in the administration who sees the President as often and enjoys the trust of our nation's Commander-in-Chief more than our next speaker. This evening, we are honored to host an admired American leader. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming White House Chief of Staff, Denis McDonough.
Well, thanks so much, Stan, for that very, very generous, in fact, overly generous introduction. I know Minister Kasoulides and I just spoke with Minister Steinitz are here. Let me just say to greet them and to greet all the distinguished guests and to underscore what I said to stand backstage, which is the President sends his warmest regards. Grateful for the tremendous support that AJC has provided for the national interest, not only during the last 5.5 years, but over the last nearly 110 years of the AJC's work. I want to not only thank Stan, as I did privately, but also thank your longtime Executive Director, David Harris, for his leadership and for inviting me here tonight. Now, of course, I'm an absolutely obvious choice for the speech tonight. After all, May is Jewish Heritage Month, and who better to reflect on Jewish heritage than a guy named Denis McDonough? But the truth is, candidly, so much of the heritage we celebrate this month is shared. My grandparents came to this country in search of a better life. And this country, more than any place else, held out the promise of opportunity that here, universal human rights would be protected, and that no matter who you were or where you come from, you could make it here if you tried. My grandma and grandpa would be pretty proud of the fact that I get to address this audience tonight. For more than a century, the AJC, the American Jewish Committee, has helped our country keep alive that promise of opportunity for all of us. You've stood up for our shared values, not just here, but around the world. You've honored the American tradition of perfecting our union with hard work and sacrifice, and the Jewish tradition that teaches us that while we are not obligated to finish that work, neither are we free to desist from it. These ideas of shared responsibility, of obligations that are bigger than ourselves, are what motivate President Obama each and every day. Under his leadership, and thanks to the determination of the American people, an economy that lost about 9 million jobs has now created 9.2 million private sector jobs. More families now know the economic security of health care, and troops who are fighting 2 wars are coming home. But we also recognize that our work is far from finished. That's why the President's laid out an opportunity agenda to keep America's founding promise alive for future generations. He's fighting to create more good jobs with good wages and a world-class education for the next generation. He's fighting for equal pay for women and a fair minimum wage for all of our workers. And as the American Jewish Committee knows well, President Obama is fighting to fix a broken immigration system. Before addressing some of the questions that Stan raised, I want to just spend a couple of minutes on this tonight, beginning by thanking you, because for years, you've been a key partner in the effort to reform our immigration system. You've argued loudly and forcefully that our current immigration system is unfair to our businesses, workers, and families alike. You've helped bring a moral dimension to this debate, one rooted in that biblical edict, "You shall not oppress a stranger, having been a stranger in the land of Egypt." And last year, thanks in no small part to your hard work, Democrats and Republicans in the Senate came together and passed a bipartisan, common-sense immigration bill. The question now is whether the House Republicans will live up to that example. It's clear what the right choice is, not just morally, but economically. A report by the Congressional Budget Office found that passing the Senate bipartisan immigration bill will grow our economy by more than 3% in 1 decade and more than 5% in 2 decades. That means we could be looking at an extra $700 billion in our economy by 2023 and $1.4 trillion by 2033. And it will shrink our deficits by more than $150 billion over the next 10 years and about $700 billion over the decade after that. But as we've seen before, in today's Washington, just because something makes sense doesn't mean it's going to get done. So in addition to thanking you for helping us get to this point, I want to urge you to keep making your voices heard. Make sure our lawmakers know what's at stake. Ask them to put aside politics and do what's right. The President believes there's still time to make that reform a reality. Just today, he invited law enforcement officials from across our country who know how important this is to come to the White House. So I promise you that as you continue your efforts to fix our broken immigration system, your president will be with you every step of the way, because he believes that ultimately this issue is about much more than politics. It's about our responsibility to keep alive the basic values that we share and the basic opportunity that so many of us and our forebears have been able to live. Of course, even as he works hard to make real our country's promise of opportunity for all, President Obama recognizes that our responsibilities do not end here at home. And those other responsibilities are what I want to just close with today. Part of what makes this country so great is that we stand by other countries that share our values around the world. I am so proud that throughout our history, the state of Israel has had no greater friend than the United States of America. The United States is proud to have been the first country to recognize the existence of the Jewish state, just 11 minutes after Israel's independence was declared. Today we celebrate a diverse, democratic ally, now known as the Startup Nation, where entrepreneurship thrives. The unbreakable bonds between our two countries are as strong as ever. And as President Obama put it last year at the UN General Assembly, the United States will never compromise our commitment to Israel's security, nor our support for its existence as a Jewish state. Time and time again, he has stood firm on the conviction that Israel has a right to defend itself and to maintain, with our support, its qualitative military edge. Over the last 5.5 years, the President has backed up those words with action. Today, the cooperation between our militaries, as Minister Steinitz and I just discussed, and our intelligence services has never been stronger. At this very moment, there are Israeli children who are sleeping more soundly, their parents more secure, because of the Iron Dome's defense system that America invested in. And with so much tumult across the region, including in Egypt and Syria, we are consulting closely with our Israeli partners every step of the way, as we saw again in Susan Rice's visit to Israel last week. Susan led the U.S. delegation of the U.S.-Israel Consultative Group, a dialogue launched by the President several years ago. The ICG, as we call it, is a first of its kind, a spot where we consult on our shared threats, including from Iran, with our dear friend Israel. It's been led by the President's National Security Advisors, first Tom Donilon and now Susan. This intensive, and dare I say, you won't be surprised about this, candid discussion reflects the unprecedented level of cooperation between our two countries and President Obama's commitment to Israel's security. And along with the many other important pieces of business she conducted in Israel last week, Susan reaffirmed the President's clear policy. The United States is committed to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. the United States is committed to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Over the last few years, we've rallied the world behind unprecedented sanctions that have helped to bring Iran to the negotiating table. Today, for the first time in a decade, progress on Iran's nuclear program has been halted and key parts of it have been rolled back. The IAEA has confirmed that Iran is meeting its commitment under the Joint Plan of Action. Earlier today, in Geneva, another round of tough negotiations among the Iranians on one side and basically the rest of the world on the other. We're engaged in serious substantive negotiations aimed at reaching a comprehensive solution that addresses the world's concerns with Iran's nuclear program. There's no doubt that significant gaps remain, and it's far from certain that we can reach a final agreement that sufficiently addresses the President's concerns about that program. But as Stan said, this is a chance to resolve this issue diplomatically, peacefully. And throughout these focused negotiations, our bottom line has not and will not change. A nuclear-armed Iran would be a grave danger to the United States, to Israel, and to the world. Even as we pursue a resolution to the Iranian nuclear issue, we remain focused every single day on countering Iran's support for terrorism and its destabilizing efforts in the region. That includes our unprecedented support for Israel's security, as well as the security of our Gulf partners. That includes our efforts to strengthen the Syrian opposition and to apply pressure to the Assad regime. And that includes our steady and coordinated efforts to expose Iranian support for terrorism, to stop the flow of weapons to terrorist groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, and to maintain our robust sanctions on Hezbollah and Iranian sponsorship of terrorist activity. Moreover, as President Obama said in Jerusalem last year, and this is a quote, "Those who adhere to the ideology of rejecting Israel's right to exist might as well reject the earth beneath them or the sky above, because Israel is not going anywhere." And with the question of Israel's existence off the table, there's another question we must ask ourselves. What will Israel's future hold? It was America's commitment to Israel's future and our abiding belief that Israelis and Palestinians deserve a future of peace and security that guided our efforts over the past year. Early in those talks, Secretary of State John Kerry came here to the AJC Global Forum because your organization, as Stan again said, understands that peace and security are inextricably linked. In the end, the interests of a Jewish state of Israel require two nations that can live in peace. In the face of an unsustainable status quo, a two-state solution is not just desirable, it is necessary for both sides. So today we're profoundly grateful for the work of Secretary Kerry and to organizations like AJC for the extraordinary efforts made over the past year. No nation has done more to stand with the parties, Israelis and Palestinians, in their search for peace than the United States of America. No nation. And though talks may be suspended, President Obama has been very clear, and I want to repeat this for you, Stan, as clearly as I can. The United States will never waver in our commitment to a just and lasting peace. Both Israelis and Palestinians face very difficult choices. Both must make difficult choices. And only Palestinians and Israelis can make the compromises that are necessary for two states to live side by side in peace and security. But just because peace is difficult doesn't mean we can stop trying. As President Obama reminds me often, and he has a sign on his desk that underscores this, hard things are hard. It's true. Fixing a broken immigration system, that's hard. Bringing an end to a decades-old conflict in the Middle East, that's hard. But our history and our heritage teaches us that hard things are not just hard, they're possible. And with your help, I believe that we can leave behind for our children a country that keeps alive its founding promise of opportunity for all and a world filled with prosperity and peace. So I thank you all for the opportunity to be here with me tonight, and I wish you all the luck in efforts over the next day. Thank you very much.